Is it a sin for Christians to drink alcohol? Let's talk about it. Hey, welcome to Kingdom Clarity. My name is Eric. The goal of this channel is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world. And today we're going to talk about drinking alcohol. And I'm sure you've heard someone fight about this, or maybe you've been the one to fight about this, but this is a gray area for some. Is alcohol allowed at all? If it is, to what extent? Is it a prohibition against alcohol if you're a Christian? So today, we're going to start by just introducing all the different thoughts and ideas around this. So if you are a Christian, it very much depends on the denomination that you're a part of, on how you may view this topic. Unless you have a biblical view of it, depending on the denomination, will vary deeply. So you have like Reformed or Calvinists, right? And if you go to one of their gatherings, even a church service, man, you might get an IPA in the lobby. Like you might get a craft beer on your way out. Reformed people love to drink. Obviously, I'm being a little funny here, but it's a part of their way of expressing themselves. Then you have Pentecostals. And I come from a Pentecostal background, and Pentecostals, man, you bring up drinking, man, it's almost as if hell is on the other side of that first sip. Like if you sip it, you're already ingesting like the sulfur of hell. At the first church I worked at, I actually had a pastor on staff who was out for his 20th anniversary with his wife. And at this church, Pentecostal church, zero tolerance for drinking, zero, no matter what the circumstance. He's out with his wife, and someone from the church sees him. They're at dinner together. He's having a glass of wine with his wife. They take a picture of it, take it to the senior pastor, and this man gets fired after being at this church for over a decade for a single glass of wine. Then you got Baptists, and Baptists are all over the place. Like it's so hard to find a common, like some drink all the time. Others are like adamantly legalistic against drinking. And so they're kind of a mixed bag all over the place. And then non-denominational, which is what we are. I think we just try to look at the Bible. What does it say? Is it clear? And if it is clear, how does it instruct us to live? So I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for or against alcohol as a general rule. Now, we will talk about drunkenness and how that's different. But me, myself, like I had an addiction problem for years with drugs and substances. And so for me, I will have a drink if I'm at a certain setting and whatever. And it feels like it's a okay place to do that. But I don't really have alcohol in the house ever. So I'm not advocating for it, but I'm not advocating against it in the way you might think. So the goal of this is not to tell you what I think, not what your denomination thinks, but what does the Bible say? Does the Bible have something to say about drinking, about alcohol, and about drunkenness? So I would say the Bible has quite a lot to say about alcohol. The word wine appears in the Bible 232 times. And then when you take this specific term, which is fermented drink, which is a strong alcoholic beverage, you see it mentioned close to 20 times. And so when we read the Bible, we need to understand a few things. It is not written to us. Now, it is written for us, but this was written to a specific culture in a specific time in history with a different audience, okay? So what can we learn from earlier cultures about alcohol and then get into the New Testament, and how does that relate to us today? So we're going to read in Deuteronomy chapter 7. And this is the ancient Israelites, and they're given blessings by God. And one of the ways in which God is showing that he's blessing them is that they're going to possess wine and new wine. Now, again, we're going to talk about, is this grape juice? Is this fermented drink? Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 7. We'll start in verse 12. It says, "If you pay attention to these laws and are careful to follow them, then the Lord your God will keep his covenant of love with you, as he swore to your ancestors. He will love you and bless you and increase your numbers." Okay, he's making a promise over the Israelites. Now, again, this is God's nature towards his people, but again, written to a different audience, so we can't just pluck this out and say, well, everything God did for them at this exact moment, he'll do for me. It says, he will bless the fruit of your womb, the crops of your land, your grain, new wine, and olive oil, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks in the land he swore to your ancestors to give you. You will be blessed more than any other people. None of your men or women will be childless, nor will any of your livestock be without young. And so what God is doing here is, as his people are faithfully obedient to him, he promises that he's going to bless them and bring them prosperity. And one of the ways in which he's going to prosper them is through new wine. Now, again, this is not grape juice. Like, this is actual fermented wine, okay? Because he would have just said grape juice, okay? We have to understand this distinction in the Bible. And so I believe that this verse and others just like this in the Old Covenant, they're clearly stating that wine in God's eyes is a sign of blessing, and it is meant to be enjoyed. Then we go to the new covenant, and I could have read a whole bunch of places in the Old Covenant, but let's go to the new. And so I've heard people make arguments for or against Jesus drinking. Some will say absolutely not. There's no way he would have, because he would have been promoting sin if he would have been indulging in alcohol. Other people, they read the text, they look to the original words and come to a different conclusion. So in Luke chapter 7, Jesus is saying this about himself. Here's what he says. He says, in verse 33, he says, "For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine." Okay, so John the Baptist was paving the way for the Messiah. He had a very different habit of eating, and he abstained from alcohol, from wine. So Jesus is clarifying, John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine. And you say he has a demon. So people were demonizing him because of these restrictions he placed on himself. Now, he didn't quote a Bible verse. The reason I don't do this is because God forbid it. He made a personal decision for himself. He wasn't going to eat these types of food or drink wine. Then verse 34, it says, "The Son of Man came eating and drinking." Okay, now some are saying, yeah, he came drinking water. No, it doesn't make any sense, because in the verse before, he attached eating to bread and drinking to wine. And so he says, "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners." Now, Jesus didn't deny that he came eating and drinking. He's correcting what they think about him. He's saying, I'm not a glutton, which is a sin, and I'm not a drunkard, which is a sin. But yes, I eat good food, and yes, I drink good wine. I think that is a very accurate reading of the text. But some will say, well, Jesus couldn't have possibly promoted wine because it can lead to drunkenness. But like, do you know God created rocks? And you know the rock that Cain used to kill Abel? Is it as if God was promoting the killing of someone because he created the rock? No. Did God create food? Yes. Is gluttony a sin? Yes. So just because God created something for us to enjoy in moderation, it's not God's fault that people abuse it and it becomes sinful. So I think this is a clear teaching that Jesus did in fact enjoy wine. But then we go to an even, I would say, lower hanging fruit, no pun intended, and John chapter 2, and many people have quoted this. And there's interpretations on is this wine fermented? I'm going to make a case that I don't see any way possible that it couldn't have been. But we're going to read the first miracle that Jesus ever did. Some of you are very familiar with this. John chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, 'They have no more wine.'" Now, hang on to this word wine, because some people, they just want to say this means grape juice. But the word that is used here for wine is the exact same word. It's oinos in the Greek. It's the exact same word that we see in Ephesians chapter 5, where Paul tells us, do not get drunk on wine, oinos, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. So Jesus here, he makes the same thing that we're told later not to get drunk on. And I hate to break this to you, but you can't get drunk on grape juice. It's not possible. So they have no more oinos. Verse 4, woman, who talks to their mom that way? I wish I could. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. Okay, they could have just said, hey, go get me some grapes and crush them up and make grape juice. No, it's a miracle because wine takes time to ferment. This isn't something you can do instantaneously. That's what makes it a miracle. Verse 9 continuing, he says, he did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. There is no way to interpret that as grape juice. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Well, you bring out the bad grape juice first so people get filled up and get tipsy on the bads. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so these arguments that we see against alcohol, and there's people that make these all the time, that this wine wasn't alcoholic, that it was simply grape juice, it doesn't make sense because we're not forbidden in Ephesians chapter 5 from drinking grape juice. Again, just to remind you, verse 18, Ephesians 5 says, do not get drunk. Okay? Drunk means you have lost your sound mind. You are no longer in control of your emotions, your mental state, your human body. You're outside of control. He says, do not get drunk on wine, the same word for what Jesus miraculously made at the wedding at Canaan. We see many other places. I'll just point to a few of them. We see Paul tell Timothy to take a little wine for his frequent illnesses. We see this in 1 Timothy chapter 5, where Timothy is ill. He's just drinking water. Again, water back in this day, this water would have been very unsanitary many times. It was not helpful. And fermented drink actually proved to be more medicinal in many cases than just water and rest. And so Paul tells Timothy to drink a little wine, oinos, to help with his stomach ailments. I would say there's many other passages, but the ones I've read, as well as others, they declare, I believe definitively, that God does not prohibit alcohol as a general prohibition for Christians. What God does seem to have is a somewhat favorable view of wine and that it can and should be enjoyed. So the question is, how? Again, you may not agree with me, but I think the Bible is clear that drinking alcohol is not a sin. Just as a blanket statement, you cannot just definitively say alcohol is a sin. So what is a sin? Is there a line? I think there's an obvious line, and it's a line of drunkenness. Now, again, if you're 6'7", 340 pounds, 1 or 2 beers may not do the same to you as a 5-foot female that weighs 108 pounds, right? So I think there is levels of moderation. And I think you're the one who, if you are led by the Spirit, you are filled by the Spirit, I think you know, you know what, I'm good here. Like, I don't need to continue to drink. Like, I've had a glass of wine, or I've had a drink, and that's probably my limit, whatever that is. And again, the Bible doesn't tell us you can have half a beer, 1 beer, 2 beers, right? It says moderation is kind of the principle, and drunkenness is the sin. And so I'll read you a couple places where drunkenness is clearly forbidden, right? So drunkenness is to be outside of your sober mind, where you're not making rational decisions, you're not speaking in a way that's normal to you, you're doing things that are out of character. Those would all be signs of drunkenness. But Genesis chapter 9, we see Noah, starting in verse 20. It says, Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, wine, he became drunk, right? Because that's what wine can do. It's not grape juice, it's wine. He became drunk and laid uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father naked. So obviously Noah has drank to the point where now he has disrobed himself and he's near his children. Obviously, you don't need to be a theologian to know, okay, that's way too far. Like, you have embarrassed yourself, you've embarrassed your family. This is sinful. So we see a clear rebuttal to drunkenness here. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1, it says, wine is a mocker and beer a brawler. Now, I've heard some people use this to say there's a prohibition against alcohol. I just watched a popular YouTuber use this exact same verse and the next one I'm going to use, trying to make a case that alcohol in itself is sinful. Wine is a mocker and beer a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. It doesn't say someone who consumes it responsibly. It says someone who is led astray. Now this alcohol has become a dependence, an addiction. It's become something that is mastering you and controlling you, and it's leading you astray into bad decisions, bad moments, okay? So it's not a prohibition against alcohol, although some have tried to make the case. You got to read the whole thing. Proverbs chapter 23, again, some have just taken one verse out of this and tried to say, well, this is obviously, what God has said about alcohol, and this is the whole story, right? Proverbs chapter 23, which is a book of wisdom. So here's the wisdom, verse 29. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaints? Who has needless bruises? Who has bloodshot eyes? It's like, man, who's been going through something? Who's in difficulty? Verse 30. Those who linger over wine, who go to sample bowls of mixed wine, okay? So this is talking about someone who, man, you're pursuing it. Like you're going through some tough stuff, you're having a difficult time in life, and you are lingering, right? You know what that means when like you said no to the guy 3 times, but he just keeps staying around. He's lingering, he's not leaving, right? It's different than passing by. It's different than experiencing one small part. You're lingering. You're going to sample bowls of mixed wine. So it's like going to Sam's Club and you're just finding all the sample carts, right? This is kind of what the illustration is here. Then verse 31, and some just take this verse and they say, oh, well, look at this. Like God said you shouldn't drink wine. Here's verse 31. It says, do not gaze at wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. Your eyes will see strange sights and your mind will imagine confusing things. You will be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on top of the rigging. They hit me, you will say, but I'm not hurt. They beat me, but I don't feel it. Okay? So what is Proverbs actually telling us? Don't linger. Don't go sampling and just going from one to another. This is speaking much more about dependency and addiction and overconsumption and drunkenness. Because like, do not gaze at wine when it's red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. So you can't even look at wine now. Like if it's red and if you want to be that literal with it, like if you look at red wine, like you're doing something sinful. In the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. Well, we know through moderation, if you drink a glass of wine, it doesn't poison you like a viper. And so again, you got to read everything around it. And again, Proverbs is a book of wisdom, using a lot of metaphor and a lot of illustrative language. 1 Timothy chapter 3. Okay, we're talking about drunkenness as a sin. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, we get all of the qualifications of an elder, of a deacon, of a pastor. And one of the clear qualifications is that this elder, this pastor, this leader must not be given to drunkenness and not indulge in much wine. Does not say they can't drink wine. It says they must not be given to drunkenness. Now, again, this is for the highest office in the church. This isn't just for anybody. This is for pastors and elders and shepherds and leaders. The command is not that they would never sip alcohol. The command is that they wouldn't be given over to alcohol. So what is the conclusion that we can make by looking at God's word accurately? I think it's very possible that Christians can live a holy, obedient, submissive life to the Lord and also enjoy alcohol in moderation. Okay, moderation is the word here, because if you have to go home every single day from work because you're stressed out, because you're a teacher and the kids drive you nuts, or you're a mechanic, and man, the first thing I need to do when I get in the house, man, I need a glass of wine, I need a drink, I need a beer. Okay, I think now we're talking about something else. It feels as if there's probably a dependency. But in moderation, at a social setting, at a wedding, with your husband or your wife, with a few friends, and you know, you're not driving. Like, I don't see any prohibition against alcohol. I do see a strong command for us not to be given over to addiction and given over to drunkenness. And so when you are living a life that is dependent on alcohol, I think it's very, very difficult for us to pursue the Lord and serve the Lord in the way that he would desire. And so I think if you're a Christian and it's within your Christian liberty, okay, which means it may not be a sin for you, but it's a sin for me, and you say, man, alcohol's off limits for me. Like, I can't have it in my house. I can't be around it. I can't drink it. I would say, praise God, glorify him in that. If you're a Christian that says, hey, I can drink with responsibility, and I know where my line is, and I can drink in moderation, and it doesn't consume me, I would say that's okay as well. But one last, I think, a rule of life within Christian community is we need to consider other people. Okay, so if you are in the confines of your home and you can drink alcohol, fine. You're not causing anyone else to stumble if you can do it responsibly. But I think there are gatherings, there are social settings in which there is somebody there that it would be a stumbling block to them. Maybe they're a new convert. Maybe they're an unbeliever. Maybe they have an addiction from their past. And for you in that case, is alcohol really that necessary? I mean, could you pass it up at that one barbecue for the sake of someone else? I think that is good Christian unity. So we see this, and I'll end with this, in Romans chapter 14. I think this is a good way of looking at alcohol and how it applies to others. Verse 19, Paul says, let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. All food is clean, but it is wrong for a person to eat anything that causes someone else to stumble. Verse 21, it is better not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to fall. So I think this is where we care for other people. And just because I can drink doesn't mean that I should in that setting, right? So I think that's where we're just spirit-led, right? God, give me godly wisdom and discernment. Is this an okay setting? Is this not? Should I practice kind of reserving this, or is this okay? But I would say, I think the Bible's pretty clear here. I don't know how you can make an absolute statement that alcohol is forbidden for a Christian. I will say, do it responsibly. You don't need alcohol. If this is your stress reliever, man, you need Jesus, and you need his love, and you need his compassion and grace. You need a mentor. You need prayer. If you're going to alcohol to fill a void or to deal with real issues, mentally, emotionally, I would say that becomes where addiction becomes very possible and probable. So I hope this was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments. Did you find this helpful? Did you agree? Do you not agree? The verses I missed. I'd love to hear from you. As always, the goal of this channel is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world. Hope to see you back here next week.